what I've learned is that if we reduce stress, it's not that we just feel a little bit better. It can completely change your life. And our goal as humans, I believe, is to live at the most fulfilling, profoundly rich, intricate life that we can live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. We have a very special conversation prepared for you today. In front of us, we have Dr. Poorvi Shah. She is double board certified in integrative and holistic medicine, as well as family medicine. And she's a keynote and workshop speaker for mindfulness and helping to reduce stress in the workplace, which will be a very key highlight that we will be discussing today. And for anyone that feels that they are too busy or too stressed out to tune in, we're looking at you because it'll be a very important conversation. And she's going to teach you tips on how to implement that even when your schedule is extremely busy. So Dr. Shah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I love looking at your puppy.
Well, thank you.
That's a very stress-reducing technique right there. Yeah.
Yes, a little bit of distraction and break. And this is Reese for anyone who hasn't met him yet. And he actually sometimes does add stress because he'll intervene. So his invitation to join us on the channel is what helps us to reduce the stress. We just work with it. And I had the opportunity to learn about you, and I've really enjoyed understanding where your mindfulness practice comes from. I think it's so important. So I'd love for you to share your background and how mindfulness has come such a key aspect of your life.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'll start from the beginning. I grew up in an Indian household, Indian immigrants, my parents were, and they accommodated, assimilated to American culture, but they brought some of their practices and techniques from their homeland. And one of them was mindfulness and meditation. And to back up a little more, they were born into the Jain religion, which is what I practice. Jainism is, I would say, it has similarities to Buddhism and similarities to Hinduism. So it's somewhere in the middle, but it's its own religion. And so in Jainism, we were taught to meditate. We were taught to do yoga. I started learning around the age of 10 years old. And I had those tools with me for the rest of my life, which I thank my parents every day for those tools. Mm-hmm. So if we fast forward, I would say this, I think it may be because of those tools, or it may be just my personality. I've always been a type B personality. I've never been a type A personality.
Can't relate to that.
I can't relate to that.
Maybe that's why I'm like, yes, and how do I, yes.
Yeah, so all of this type A stuff was very new to me when I went to medical school. And so I go to medical school, and it's just this, everyone had warned me, everyone tells you the horror stories and how you're going to have to really, it's going to consume your life. But I think I never understood that. Mm-hmm. And so I started to go into medical school, and all the work was just overwhelming, as it is for most students. And so it took me a little while, but I started to eat healthy. I started to exercise. I started to do those kinds of things. And those helped, to a certain extent. But then I came back and I realized, the big thing that I've forgotten is that I'm not meditating or doing yoga. And so I brought that back into my life. And that was the key. That was the thing that really got me through residency and internship. And I think prevented me from really going into burnout.
Wow. And when we think about mindfulness, so there's some times where I'm not a practiced meditator. And sometimes when we think about people trying to go to sleep at night and they all of a sudden have that pause in their day and they can think a lot, what would you recommend for people when they're learning to meditate to not get in the trap of all of a sudden being overwhelmed? Because I think that the distractions often are in order to avoid our thoughts. So can you share with us how we can actually utilize that meditation to help improve our relationship with our thoughts and working with them?
Yeah, so that is one thing that happens a lot, is that people don't want to look at their thoughts. And so we keep ourselves busy, we ignore things that we're thinking about, but they just keep circling in our head anyways, right? They're in the background. And so what meditation does, it kind of clears that background noise out. you're not necessarily eliminating any thoughts, but what you're doing is you're kind of dampening the thoughts, and you're actually distracting yourself as well. You're putting a focus on something else. So every meditation practice, there will be another focus. So for mantra meditation, for example, you focus on repeating a mantra over and over. So your mind focuses on those words instead of focusing on your thoughts. In terms of mindfulness meditation, you are focusing on your breath and your body sensations. So you're trying to stay focused in the present moment, really focusing on your breath, and again, quieting those thoughts as much as you can. So you're basically disengaging from the conversation. The thoughts are still going to be there, but you're not engaging the conversation. And I can give you an example of that if you like.
Yeah, I would love an example of that.
Okay. So if I was, let's say I sat down for meditation, it's been a really crazy busy day. It's around 5 o'clock, the end of my work day, and I had it scheduled on my calendar. Says, okay, I'm going to do it. So I sit down and I start to breathe and relax and feel the sensations in my body. And the thought comes up, oh, I don't have any tomatoes for dinner. Oh, shoot, I need tomatoes. Well, I'm going to go to the store. And should I go to Whole Foods or should I go to Trader Joe's? Oh, no, maybe I'll go to that market at the corner. Oh my gosh, the prices are so expensive now. What is this inflation business? And am I going to have to get another job? This is ridiculous. I can't afford it. So, and then I brought myself back to the breath, right? So I went from there are no tomatoes to I'm going to have to get another job, right? That was my line of thinking, which isn't necessarily a healthy line of thinking. So what I could have done is just said, okay, I know I have to get tomatoes. Let's put that conversation to the side and let's go back to our breath. And so as much as you can, you try to disengage from those conversations. Oftentimes the conversations are much more negative than that. And that's why we want to disengage from them. And it's not always possible. Sometimes your mind is just, something's happened during the day that's very stressful. You're just going to follow it. So you do your best. And even if you follow those thoughts, if you're breathing and you're trying to relax your nervous system, it's more likely that you're not going to react to those thoughts even later on.
Mm. Yeah, and I shared with you during med school so my catastrophic thinking was if I made a mistake, which I am type A, so this will be relatable. And even in med school, I think it has a similar effect on everyone's mindset is like, if I made a mistake or was doubting my trajectory in my career, I spiraled to I'm worthless. Like it was like, oh, boom, worthless. And I had the opportunity to be involved with one of the Mindfulness Mondays. And I looked forward to it every single Monday. And I carved out that opportunity. It was just a short 30 minutes. It was during lunch. And so you're like, oh man, you would observe a lot of people thinking that they don't have a lot of time. But its impact was so significant that I think that positive feedback, if I know this is going to be very meaningful and significant, helped me to go. And in your practice, you've provided these tools that people can implement into their day, no matter how busy they are, without having to go and carve out that 30 minutes being somewhere else. Can you share some of the techniques that you have that can help anyone, no matter how busy they are?
Sure. So first of all, I live in Washington, D.C. It's a high power city. It's full of type A's, right? I don't think there are many type B's here. I'm probably one of the few.
Thank goodness for everyone around you, because I will say the environment, if it's all really uptight, it's worse, right? You're like, I'm going crazy.
Right, exactly. So I have people come in, all day long. And, we know that 80%, 60 to 80% of illnesses are caused by stress, right? We know that stress can exacerbate asthma. It can exacerbate rashes in terms of eczema. It can cause a lot of medical issues. And so for that reason alone, on top of just people coming into my office feeling exhausted and mentally and physically burnt out, I started to implement these practices where I would just teach them, some techniques. So the first technique I think that is so important is to create that meditation practice. And so you can do a mindfulness meditation practice, which is probably the easiest. There are a lot of apps out there which teach you how to do it. Basically, it's sitting in a posture. You can do it at work, you can do it at home, at your desk or on a cushion. and just breathing and just noticing your breath, noticing the sensations in your body, and staying very present and aware. And if your thoughts start to come through, you just don't engage them as much as possible. You go back to your breath. Right. So that's a very easy type of meditation practice. So what I usually recommend for people is just 5 minutes. 5 minutes can be so profound. And I've seen it over and over in my practice where people, parents or people who travel a lot don't have time to do anything more than 5 minutes. And the best time to meditate is usually first thing in the morning, right when you wake up, or last thing at night before you go to bed, because we don't have a lot of time in between, right? We're not usually slowing down. So just taking 5 minutes and doing that meditation can make a change. As you said, you did 30 minutes, which bravo, that's a good amount of time. But starting with 5 and then over, a few weeks make it 7, make it 10, And some of the people who are at work for long hours, I'll tell them to schedule it on their schedule. So maybe at lunch, you put in that 5 minutes, or schedule 10 minutes in case you're running late, or at the end of your day, or right when you walk in, just so you have it on your schedule, because if it's on your schedule, you're more likely to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I just was noticing. So when I started grad school, we were just talking about that a little bit, is that I was overwhelmed. And in order to help reduce overwhelm, I scheduled school time, work time, non-school time, non-work time. Like you schedule in that time that you really need to be intentional about not working and not school, and trust that the time you've given for the allotted tasks. And then of course, the flexibility of knowing that things may not fit into your nice, tightly scheduled periods. But I was also thinking back, and I'll laugh, but I know this is common, is especially when it comes to having kids or being at work, was I found that even when you're going to the bathroom and you say, you know what, I'm going to use it as my cue to slow down and to breathe. During residency, that was my sacred space, was like, okay, I am here. This is my time to breathe.
Absolutely. So I call them breath breaks. So the thing is, especially if you have a high powered job, like being a physician, or you're in meetings all day and, or sometimes you have crisis management at work. So these things come up hour to hour. So if you do the 5-minute meditation in the morning, that's going to bring you into a nice space, but you might need something throughout the day. And so I call them breath breaks. So breath breaks are just, the easiest way that I do it, and the quickest way, is just take 3 long, slow, deep breaths. And sometimes 3 breaths will just focus you. So I had a friend who was an emergency room physician in downtown Los Angeles, where they were understaffed and they were getting traumas left and right. And he would just, before he went to go see a patient, he would turn to the corner and take 3 breaths. And then he would walk in to see the patient, and he said he would feel more focused. He wasn't reactive, and he could concentrate on what was going on with so much more ease and grace than if he hadn't done that. So even 3 breaths can make a huge difference. And like you said, like if you're walking to the bathroom, like before you get up to go to the bathroom, just do those 3 breaths and then get up. If you're taking, a water break, just do those 3 breaths and take your water break. If you need to, you can schedule it on your calendar, just 5. Again, it's 3 breaths, so it's going to be like a minute. But if you're on Zoom and you're in a stressful meeting, you can do those 3 breaths, right? Anytime.
I'm looking for everybody who's doing their breathing around, like, I'm just, wait, we're going to take a pause. I love that. It's fun.
Right. So it can be done. And if you're going to have a stressful week, you have like deadlines or projects that are due, then just do more of those breaks. Do the breath breaks, the BBs, all throughout the day. And that's going to get you through the daytime stress. And then you do your meditation, maybe in the morning or in the evening or in the middle of the day at lunch, whatever works for you.
Wow. And I hear a lot of times, and we'll get into mindful communication. I think that's a good liaison. But before that, I was just, when we look at race, I noticed that when I am intentionally pausing, even if we have a dog that we're walking or we're entering into our house after work to communicate with our family, I noticed a huge difference when, sometimes people will say like, I sit in my car for 5 minutes before I go inside. And it's that transitional period between work and home. And I really implemented that because I was being reactive towards this cute puppy. And I know people say that about their kids and they're feeling a lot of guilt and shame. Like, I can't believe I just exploded. I'm like, well, of course, if we think about our day and we didn't give ourselves the opportunity to like decompress a little bit, that mindful communication and that purposeful pause can be so helpful in how we show up.
Absolutely. So remember that we were meant to farm during the day or forage during the day, stare at the stars at night and then sleep 9 hours, right? And we're doing a little bit more than that.
Can we remind people what were we supposed to do?
Farm or forage, stare at the stars and sleep 9 or more hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not doing that clearly. And especially with technology, we're going nonstop all the time, right? We never get a break. So we need those pauses. Every human being needs those pauses during the day. And so I call them breath breaks, just a minute, just 60 seconds, 30 to 60 seconds to kind of just take that breath and just bring you back down to, who you are, get you grounded and get you back to a peaceful way of living. So back to that present moment.
And, we're just thinking about mindfulness in relationships. I know there was a course, it was called Mindful Providers, and it was really about what you were mentioning. And I just love the connections. And I would love to hear how you would approach mindfulness when it comes to interactions with other people and mindfulness when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, so our greatest teachers are our relationships with people, right? We know that. And so mindfulness talks a little bit about how we interact with others and how we communicate with others. And so some of the concepts in mindfulness are, being kind and compassionate, being curious. So when we are speaking to someone, when we're having a conversation or a discussion or a meeting at work, you want to actively listen. So especially whether it's one-on-one or in a group, you want to actively listen. And actively listening is really immersing yourself in the person's, line of thought. You're paying attention to their body language. You're listening to the tone of their voice, picking up any emotional cues. So you're really trying to hear them and really see where they're coming from. So that's the first step. The next step is to have compassion, right? We don't know what that person went through this morning, last week, last year, or in their whole life, right? So you try to have compassion for what they're telling you. Sometimes people come to you upset or angry, but try to have compassion, stay in your present awareness, don't take it personally, right? It's not about you, it's about what they're going through. And if you have compassion, a lot of times people will de-escalate, they'll calm down. And the next thing is to be curious, not judgmental, right? So being curious is asking questions. If they've just shared what their needs are, ask questions about it. Show them that you're curious and that you're really listening and that you really want to help them. And you never judge anyone for what they're asking for, right? Your needs are going to be different than theirs, but that doesn't make anyone wrong. So we always try to be very non-judgmental. And then the fourth thing is just looking for a win-win solution if it's possible. It's not always possible, right? But if it is, that's going to be the best solution. If you can compromise in any way, or if you can come up with something that helps your needs be met and their needs be met, that's going to be the best. And sometimes it takes a little while for us to come up with a solution, right? So it's okay to say, you know what, let me sleep on it. Maybe you need to do a little meditation practice and get your thoughts clear. You don't want to say something out of reactivity, right? It never helps. It only escalates situations. And our goal is always to de-escalate because we want to make sure we're treating the person with kindness and respect. So sometimes you just, say, I'll get back to you and look for that win-win solution if possible. And so that's really the framework of mindful communication. And if you can use that with kids, you can use that with in romantic relationships, you can use that in the workplace. Leaders should be using that with their teams, and it can really shift everything.
Mm.
Because what you're doing is you're putting each other on equal level, and you're really showing the other person that their words are valued and respected and they're being heard.
Wow. And I think about what you were saying, it really provides that environment of psychological safety. Because I think about environments where we think that, oh, that doesn't feel like a good environment. And it's usually very reactive. And as a sensitive person, I noticed I was very sensitive to people that were reacting. And then I didn't like how I would show up in response. That's where I got into the mindful providers. I'm like, I felt that inside. Like, I do not like how I'm showing up right now. And that's such a testament of like, if things are getting heating up, to actually even talking like lower and being able to know within yourself that you've already done that mindfulness practice, that you've already been grounded and showing up in that calm compassion. I can imagine how much difference, and even bringing down the other person and hopefully making it a more productive conversation or tabling, right? But just to reduce the amount of things that are said that may not have been productive in that conversation.
Exactly. So what we're trying to do is make sure they're valued and respected, right? And sometimes you just need to be kind, right? The kindness doesn't cost any money, it's free, but we live in a society where we're kind of taught that to be the tough one and to fight back, and I understand that, like in some situations, of course, I'm not advocating for abuse or manipulation or control, right? But in other situations, if you can be kind to the other person, it can change everything. And I think the other part of it is you also want to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
So when we talk about mindful communication and mindfulness in general, it's a lot of it is about being having self-compassion, being compassionate toward yourself, towards your thoughts and towards your actions, and valuing and respecting yourself, right? So a lot of times, for example, I'll say, I really don't feel like exercising today. I just want to take a day off. And then I'll force myself to get ready and exercise, and I'm hating it every minute. And then, I run late and it kind of throws off my day. And I think, oh, I should have listened to myself. What's wrong with listening to yourself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with meeting your own needs and having compassion for yourself, right? And being kind to yourself. So a big part of mindfulness is also to work on yourself. And if you have more compassion and kindness for yourself, it's so easy to give it to others. It just is.
That's such a good example. And I think being a leader, right, to set that kindness, I think also, like you said, it's that we want that armor up. We see a leader as someone that's brave and strong, but really having someone that provides that psychological safety is much more helpful. And I also feel like that is the untold truth about people that are quiet or being great leaders as well, or just kind and just lead by example. And if that leader is having trouble with the way that they communicate, I often think, that person's a person too, and it kind of might be a reflection of how they're feeling about themselves, and offer them grace, right? That's something I've had to learn is I want to be able to have compassion for self and others, because that person may not have been able to offer themselves that.
Exactly. We are so hard on ourselves, right? We're our worst critics. And so remembering that, and that's why you want to give kindness. But I'll tell you, over the years, I think doctors do this a lot, where we aren't kind to ourselves, and we're, as you mentioned, one mistake and we're a failure kind of idea. As I started to become more kind and compassionate towards myself, my heart just opened and I wanted to share it with everyone. It just shifted everything. I can't explain it in words really, but I just noticed that I was nicer to people because I was nicer to myself, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And you can palpate it in your presence. I was mentioning you have a healing presence, very calm. Like, I want to be calmer, in your presence, and that's extremely healing. And even as I'm thinking from a patient perspective, being in your presence, and often all they truly need is to be heard. You're talking about the act of listening when it comes to relationships in general. Like, that could be the most healing thing you offer that person.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, in my practice, and even with friends and family members, when I say the phrase, I hear you, it blows people away. Like you can see in their eyes that something changes. And all it is 3 words. Just say, I hear you. Because sometimes, I'm sure everyone has seen this, where someone's saying the same thing over and over in different ways because they feel like they're not being heard, is probably their subconscious belief, right? And so I'll just look them in the eye and I'll say, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. Let me try to work on a solution for that. And it will create so much trust in the relationship, and it just creates safety, as you mentioned as well.
I'm smirking a little bit because I'm a person that repeats myself in 3 different ways, and then I judge myself. I'm like, it just literally said that, but I wasn't quite sure. And of course, we can bring in our previous experiences to, like, is this true? Is a person truly not hearing me, or am I just repeating myself because previously hadn't been heard, and trying to retrust that situation? But it definitely resonates. I'm like, I repeat myself. And now I'll be aware of when other people are repeating themselves to me, because I need to make sure I'm listening in response.
Exactly.
Beautiful. And is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience today?
So I would just say, I've studied stress for a very long time. And what I've learned is that if we reduce stress, it's not that we just feel a little bit better. It can completely change your life. And our goal as humans, I believe, is to live at the most fulfilling, profoundly rich, intricate life that we can live. And if you reduce that stress level by even, 15%, 20%, you'll be able to live that life. So I really implore people to just take one of these things we talked about today and implement it and see how you feel. It really, it'll change your life. And I've had patients over the years, in the last 2 decades I've been doing this, tell me, that you've changed my life. And so it really, and as you've said, it changed your life as well. So, and I ask you all to kind of take one thing from this lesson, one of these lessons, and put it to practice. And I'm always open to hearing feedback. So feel free to email me. I'm great with email. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how you've implemented these practices.
And some people, sometimes they just tune in audio. Would you mind sharing what your email is so they can hear it?
Sure. It's doc@poorvishah.com.
Perfect. And of course, I'll make sure to link it in the show notes. And this discussion is too great to have just for us.
So I do, I offer keynote speaking and workshop speaking as well. So we can do like a 2-hour or 4-hour workshop where we go really deep into these principles. And I also have done like 60-minute and 90-minute keynote presentations where we really break down stress and lots of other techniques and strategies, and talk about mindfulness and meditation in a much more deep level.
Amazing. And so if people are looking for a speaker and a workshop speaker, can you tell them, can they find you at the same place, or how should they reach out to you?
Sure. So I do have a profile on Speaker Hub, and also my website, my speaking website is poorvishah.com. And for patients, my patient website to become a patient of mine is, if you're local in the Washington, D.C. area, is drpoorvishah.com.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shah. I love all this information. And of course, from my own experience, I know it's extremely valuable. And we want to hear from you all how you are implementing, how you plan to implement, and the outcomes of your implementation of these new strategies. So please comment below, reach out to Dr. Shah, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jillian.